The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Air Station Pensacola as Lieutenant Sarah Martinez walked through the security checkpoint. Her crisp Navy uniform bore the insignia of her rank, and her stride carried the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where they were. But today would test that belonging in ways she never imagined. Sarah had arrived early for the joint training exercise between Navy SEALs and Army Rangers. As one of the few female officers invited to observe the elite unit operations, she knew every move would be scrutinized. What she didn't expect was to become the center of a controversy that would question everything about her military career. The trouble started in the briefing room. Sarah took her assigned seat among the other observers, pulling out her notebook to take detailed notes on the training protocols. She had studied SEAL operations extensively during her time at the Naval Academy and later during her intelligence officer training. This observation opportunity was crucial for her upcoming assignment to a joint task force. "Excuse me, ma'am," came a gruff voice from behind her. Sarah turned to see Master Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez approaching, his weathered face showing years of hard service. "I need to see your credentials." Sarah handed over her military ID without hesitation. Rodriguez examined it carefully, then looked at her with narrowed eyes. "Intelligence officer, huh? What's your connection to SEAL operations?" "I'm here as an official observer, Master Chief. My orders are in my briefing packet." Sarah kept her voice steady and professional, though something in Rodriguez's tone set her on edge. Other people in the room had begun to notice the exchange. Conversations quieted as attention focused on Sarah and the Master Chief. She felt the weight of dozens of eyes evaluating her, measuring her against some invisible standard she couldn't quite identify. Rodriguez flipped through her paperwork with deliberate slowness. "Says here you're qualified to observe SEAL training exercises." "That's interesting because I've been in the teams for 22 years, and I've never seen intelligence officers get this kind of access without specific SEAL community connections." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Sarah felt her cheeks flush, but she maintained eye contact with Rodriguez. "My qualifications speak for themselves, Master Chief. I've been cleared for this assignment through proper channels." "Maybe so," Rodriguez said, his voice carrying across the now silent room. "But I'm curious about something else. Word around the base is that you've been telling people you have SEAL connections. Some folks are saying you might even be claiming SEAL training yourself." Sarah's blood ran cold. "That's absolutely false, Master Chief. I've never claimed to be a SEAL or to have SEAL training. I'm an intelligence officer, and I've been completely honest about my background." But Rodriguez wasn't finished. "See, here's the thing. We've had problems lately with people pretending to be something they're not. Stolen valor is a serious issue, and we take it very seriously in the SEAL community. So when someone shows up with convenient paperwork and claims about SEAL access, we tend to ask questions." The room had become a pressure cooker of tension. Sarah could feel the skeptical stares of the other military personnel, their doubt palpable. She realized that somehow, somewhere, a rumor had started about her background, and now she was facing the consequences. "Master Chief, I understand your concerns about stolen valor, and I share them completely. But I assure you, I've never misrepresented my service record or training. If there's been some misunderstanding—" "Oh, there's been a misunderstanding, all right," Rodriguez interrupted. "Because according to what I'm hearing, you've been spotted wearing SEAL insignia around base. Care to explain that?" Sarah's mind raced. She had never worn SEAL insignia. It would be both illegal and deeply disrespectful. But clearly someone had reported seeing something that convinced them otherwise. "Master Chief, I have never worn SEAL insignia. Ever. I don't know where this information is coming from, but it's incorrect." Lieutenant Commander James Peterson, the exercise coordinator, stepped forward. "Is there a problem here, Master Chief?" Rodriguez turned to Peterson, his expression grim. "Sir, we have a potential stolen valor situation. This officer has been reported as claiming SEAL connections and wearing unauthorized insignia. Given the nature of today's exercise, I think we need to resolve this before we proceed." Peterson looked uncomfortable. Sarah knew he was in a difficult position. He needed to support his personnel, but he also couldn't ignore serious allegations about military integrity. Lieutenant Martinez, can you clarify your background for us? Sarah stood straighter, drawing on every ounce of military bearing she possessed. Sir, I am Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, Naval Intelligence Officer. I graduated from the Naval Academy in 2018 and completed intelligence officer training at the Naval Intelligence Activity Center in 2019. I have served with distinction in 3 duty assignments, including a deployment to the Mediterranean with the 6th Fleet. I have never claimed to be a SEAL, never claimed SEAL training, and have never worn SEAL insignia. My service record is exemplary and completely documented. The conviction in her voice seemed to give Peterson pause, but Rodriguez remained skeptical. With respect, sir, anyone can memorize a good story. What we need is proof. What kind of proof? Sarah asked, genuinely puzzled. Well, for starters, if you really are who you say you are, you should be able to answer some basic questions about naval intelligence procedures. And if you've never had SEAL connections, you shouldn't have any SEAL-specific knowledge or markings. Sarah felt a growing sense of unreality. How had a simple training observation turned into an interrogation about her military credentials? I'm happy to answer any appropriate questions about my service, Master Chief. But I want to understand exactly what allegations are being made. Rodriguez exchanged glances with several other SEALs who had gathered nearby. Here's what we know. Yesterday, Petty Officer Williams saw someone in a Navy uniform with what appeared to be SEAL insignia near the base exchange. The person matched your description. Today, you show up for an exercise that's unusual for intelligence officers to attend. Add in some scuttlebutt about you mentioning SEAL training, and we've got enough to ask serious questions. The pieces of the puzzle began to form a picture, but not one that made sense to Sarah. Someone matching her description had been seen with SEAL insignia, but she knew with absolute certainty that it hadn't been her. Either someone was deliberately impersonating her, or there had been a case of mistaken identity that had spiraled out of control. Master Chief, I understand why you're concerned, but there's been a mistake. I was not at the base exchange yesterday. I was in meetings at the Intelligence Center all day. I can provide documentation of my whereabouts. And I have never possessed SEAL insignia, let alone worn it. Documentation can be faked, Rodriguez said bluntly. What we need is something more concrete. The situation was rapidly moving beyond Sarah's control. She could see doubt and suspicion in the faces around her, and she knew that her reputation, possibly her entire career, hung in the balance. Military communities were tight-knit, and accusations of stolen valor could follow an officer forever, even if later proven false. Lieutenant Commander Peterson cleared his throat. Given the seriousness of these allegations, I think we need to postpone Lieutenant Martinez's participation in today's exercise until this matter can be resolved. Master Chief Rodriguez, I want you to coordinate with base security to investigate these claims thoroughly. Sarah felt the floor dropping out from under her. Sir, with respect, I believe I'm being subjected to a rush to judgment based on unsubstantiated rumors. I request the right to face my accusers and to present evidence of my actual whereabouts and activities. You'll have that opportunity, Lieutenant, Peterson said, though his tone had cooled considerably. But until this is resolved, you're restricted from participating in any SEAL-related activities on this base. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. In the span of 15 minutes, she had gone from being a respected intelligence officer to being under investigation for one of the most serious offenses in military culture. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was being accused of dishonoring the very institution she had dedicated her life to serving. As the briefing room began to empty, Sarah found herself standing alone with her thoughts and her growing anger. Someone had either deliberately targeted her or made a catastrophic mistake, and she was paying the price. But she wasn't going to accept this situation passively. She had worked too hard and sacrificed too much to let false accusations destroy her career. Rodriguez approached her one final time before leaving. Look, Lieutenant, If you really are innocent, the truth will come out. But understand this, the SEAL community protects its own, and we don't take kindly to people who disrespect what we've earned. If you've been playing games with our reputation, you picked the wrong people to mess with. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Master Chief, I respect the SEAL community deeply, which is exactly why I would never dishonor it through false claims. But I also respect the truth, and the truth is that I've done nothing wrong. I intend to prove that. As Rodriguez walked away, Sarah began to formulate a plan. She would need to gather evidence, find witnesses, and somehow track down the source of these allegations. Her military training had taught her to approach problems systematically and methodically. This would be no different, except that this time, her entire future depended on getting it right. The empty briefing room felt like a courtroom where she had already been convicted. But Sarah Martinez had never backed down from challenge, and she wasn't about to start now. Whatever it took, she would clear her name and find out who was responsible for putting her in this nightmare situation. The morning sun that had seemed so promising when she arrived now felt harsh and unforgiving as it streamed through the windows. But Sarah squared her shoulders and walked toward the door, ready to fight for her honor and her career. She had no idea that the truth, when it finally emerged, would be far more complex and surprising than anyone in that room could have imagined. The base security office felt like a tribunal chamber as Sarah sat across from Chief Petty Officer Anderson, the lead investigator assigned to her case. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, and the metal desk between them seemed to emphasize the adversarial nature of their meeting. Sarah had requested this interview to present her evidence, but she could already sense the skepticism in Anderson's demeanor. "Let's start from the beginning, Lieutenant Martinez," Anderson said, opening a thick file folder. "According to our initial report, you were observed wearing SEAL insignia at approximately 1,430 hours yesterday at the base exchange. The witness, Petty Officer Williams, positively identified you from your service photo." Sarah leaned forward, her hands clasped professionally in her lap. "Chief Anderson, I have documentation proving I was in a classified briefing at the Naval Intelligence Center from 1300 to 1600 yesterday. I never left the building during that time period." She slid a folder across the desk containing meeting minutes, sign-in logs, and witness statement from 3 other intelligence officers who had been present throughout the afternoon. Anderson examined the documents carefully, his expression unreadable. "These logs show you were supposed to be in meetings," he acknowledged. "But they don't prove you didn't leave. Meeting logs aren't always accurate, and people can sign in for each other." The response frustrated Sarah, but she maintained her composure. "Chief, I'm also providing sworn statements from Lieutenant Commander Williams, Lieutenant Foster, and Ensign Chun, all confirming my presence throughout the entire briefing. Additionally, the meeting was recorded for security purposes. I can request access to that recording if necessary." Anderson made notes in his file. "We'll verify those statements. But let's talk about the larger issue. How do you explain the fact that Petty Officer Williams was certain it was you he saw? He's been in the Navy for 8 years, and he's observant. He wouldn't make a casual mistake about identifying another service member." Sarah had been thinking about this question since yesterday. "Chief, I believe there are 2 possibilities. Either Petty Officer Williams saw someone who resembles me, or someone was deliberately impersonating me. Both scenarios suggest I'm the victim here, not the perpetrator." "Impersonating you?" Anderson raised an eyebrow. "That's a pretty serious accusation. Why would someone do that?" "I don't know yet, but I intend to find out. What I do know is that I've never owned SEAL insignia, never worn it, and never claimed to be a SEAL. My service record speaks for itself." Anderson flipped through more pages in his file. "Actually, that brings up another point. We've had 3 separate reports over the past month about someone claiming SEAL connections. Each time, the description matched you. Are you telling me that's all coincidence?" Sarah felt her stomach drop. This was worse than she had realized. "Chief, this is the first I'm hearing about multiple reports. Can you give me more details about these incidents?" 2 weeks ago, Someone matching your description was overheard at the officers' club discussing SEAL training experiences. Last week, there was a report of a female officer with your general appearance wearing what looked like a SEAL trident pin at the commissary. Now this incident with the full insignia. That's a pattern, Lieutenant. The room seemed to spin slightly as Sarah processed this information. Someone had been systematically building a case against her, creating multiple incidents that would inevitably lead to this moment. Chief Anderson, I was not present at any of those incidents. I can provide documentation of my whereabouts for all of those times if you'll give me the specific dates and times. We'll need that documentation, Anderson replied. But understand, Lieutenant, this level of evidence suggests either you're lying to me or someone is conducting an elaborate campaign to frame you. The second option seems pretty unlikely. Sarah straightened in her chair. Chief, with respect, I think you need to consider the possibility that the second option is exactly what's happening. Someone has been impersonating me, and I need your help to find out who and why. Before Anderson could respond, there was a knock on the door. Enter, he called. Master Chief Rodriguez stepped into the room, his expression grim. Chief Anderson, we've got a problem. I just finished interviewing the witnesses from yesterday's incident, and there's something you need to know. Anderson gestured for Rodriguez to continue. Sarah felt her pulse quicken, unsure whether this development would help or hurt her case. Petty Officer Williams is absolutely certain about his identification, Rodriguez began. But here's the thing. He says the person he saw had a distinctive tattoo on her left forearm, some kind of military unit insignia. Williams noticed it specifically because it was visible below the uniform sleeve. Sarah's mind raced. She did have a tattoo on her left forearm, but it wasn't a unit insignia. It was something much more personal and much more significant than anyone in this room realized. Lieutenant Martinez, Anderson said, do you have a tattoo on your left forearm? Sarah hesitated for just a moment. The tattoo was something she rarely discussed, and for good reason. But if it could help prove her innocence, she had no choice but to reveal it. Yes, Chief, I do have a tattoo on my left forearm, but it's not what Petty Officer Williams described. Can we see it? Rodriguez asked. Sarah slowly rolled up her left sleeve, revealing an intricate tattoo that covered most of her forearm. But instead of a unit insignia, it was something far more complex and meaningful, a detailed representation of a Navy cross surrounded by specific military symbols that most people wouldn't recognize. Anderson and Rodriguez both leaned forward to examine the tattoo more closely. Rodriguez's expression changed from skepticism to confusion. Lieutenant, that's not a standard unit tattoo. What exactly is it? Sarah took a deep breath. It's a memorial tattoo, Master Chief. Those symbols represent something very personal about my family's military service. Can you be more specific? Anderson asked, his tone slightly softer now. Sarah looked down at the tattoo, her fingers tracing the edges unconsciously. My father was Master Chief Petty Officer Roberto Martinez. He served with SEAL Team 6 for 12 years before he was killed in action in Afghanistan in 2015. This tattoo incorporates symbols from his service, including some that are specific to his unit and his missions. The room fell silent. Rodriguez and Anderson exchanged glances, clearly not having expected this revelation. Sarah continued, her voice steady despite the emotion behind her words. I got this tattoo after his funeral as a way to honor his service and sacrifice. But I've always been careful not to wear anything or say anything that might suggest I earned these symbols myself. I know the difference between honoring someone's service and claiming it as your own. Rodriguez cleared his throat. Lieutenant, if your father served with SEAL Team 6, that explains why you might have detailed knowledge about SEAL operations. It also explains why you'd be qualified to observe training exercises. Yes, Master Chief. I grew up around the SEAL community. I understand the culture, the dedication, and the sacrifice involved. That's exactly why I would never disrespect it through stolen valor. Anderson made more notes in his file. This changes the context significantly, but it still doesn't explain why multiple witnesses have identified you as the person making false claims. Sarah nodded, which brings us back to my theory about impersonation. Chief Anderson, I think someone has been studying me, learning about my appearance, and possibly even about my father's service. They've been creating incidents designed to implicate me specifically. That's a pretty sophisticated operation for what would essentially be a prank, Rodriguez observed. Unless it's not a prank, Sarah replied. What if someone wants me removed from my current assignment or discredited for professional reasons? I'm scheduled to deploy with a joint task force next month. That assignment is highly competitive, and not everyone was happy about my selection. Anderson leaned back in his chair. You're suggesting someone is committing multiple military offenses to sabotage your career? I'm suggesting it's possible and worth investigating. Chief, you said there were 3 incidents over the past month. I can account for my whereabouts during all of them. But more importantly, if someone is impersonating me, they might not know about this tattoo. They might be expecting me to have a unit insignia that would support their story. Rodriguez studied the tattoo again. Lieutenant, those symbols on your tattoo, some of them are pretty specific to classified operations. How do you know about them? Sarah met his gaze steadily. Because my father told me about them before he died, Master Chief. He wanted me to understand what he had dedicated his life to. But he also made me promise that I would never claim those experiences as my own. I've kept that promise. The 2 investigators continued their examination of the evidence, but Sarah could sense a shift in the room's atmosphere. Her explanation about the tattoo and her father's service had introduced reasonable doubt about the allegations against her. Lieutenant Martinez, Anderson said finally, I want to verify everything you've told us today. I'll need complete documentation of your whereabouts for all 3 alleged incidents, and I want to speak with everyone who can corroborate your statements. I'll provide everything you need, Chief. Rodriguez stood up. There's something else we need to do. I want to bring in Petty Officer Williams and have him look at your actual tattoo. If he's been truthful about seeing a unit insignia, then we know for certain that whoever he saw wasn't you. Sarah felt a glimmer of hope for the first time since this ordeal began. I'm completely willing to do that, Master Chief. As the meeting concluded, Anderson gathered his files. Lieutenant, I want to be clear about something. If you're telling the truth about all of this, then someone has gone to extraordinary lengths to damage your reputation and career. That's not just stolen valor. That's conspiracy and impersonation of a military officer. We'll investigate this thoroughly. Thank you, Chief. That's all I'm asking for, a thorough and fair investigation. As Sarah left the security office, she felt both relief and apprehension. The tattoo revelation had clearly changed the investigator's perspective, but she knew the case was far from closed. Someone out there was still working to destroy her career, and until they were caught, she remained under a cloud of suspicion. Walking across the base in the afternoon heat, Sarah's mind returned to her father's words from years ago. Integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. But sometimes, Mija, you have to fight for the right thing even when everyone is watching. Today, everyone was definitely watching, and Sarah Martinez was ready to fight. The confrontation Sarah had been dreading came sooner than expected. At 0800 the next morning, she was called back to the security office for what Chief Anderson described as a witness identification session. Petty Officer Williams would examine her tattoo and compare it to what he remembered seeing at the base exchange. Sarah arrived to find a room full of people she hadn't expected. In addition to Anderson and Rodriguez, Lieutenant Commander Peterson was present, along with a woman she didn't recognize wearing commander's insignia. The tension in the room was palpable. Lieutenant Martinez, Peterson began, I'd like you to meet Commander Sarah Blackwood from Naval Criminal Investigative Service. NCIS has taken an interest in this case. Sarah's heart sank. NCIS involvement meant the allegations against her were being treated as serious criminal matters, not just administrative issues. Commander Blackwood stepped forward with a professional but stern expression. Lieutenant Martinez, I understand you've been cooperative with the base investigation, and I appreciate that. However, we've discovered some additional information that requires federal law enforcement attention. What kind of additional information, ma'am? Sarah asked. struggling to keep her voice steady. Blackwood consulted her notes. Yesterday evening, we received a report from a Naval Intelligence Center about some irregularities in your security clearance file. It seems someone has been accessing classified information using credentials associated with your name and service number. The room seemed to tilt around Sarah. This was no longer just about stolen valor accusations. She was now being implicated in potential espionage activities. Commander, that's impossible. My clearance is current and properly maintained. I haven't accessed any systems inappropriately. We'll determine that through our investigation, Blackwood replied. But the timing is suspicious. These unauthorized accesses occurred on the same dates as the reported stolen valor incidents. It suggests a pattern of someone using your identity for multiple illegal activities. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. Someone wasn't just impersonating her to embarrass her or damage her reputation. They were using her identity to commit serious federal crimes. Commander, this proves my theory about impersonation. Someone has been systematically using my identity. Or, Rodriguez interjected, it proves you've been lying about everything from the beginning. Before Sarah could respond, there was another knock on the door. Anderson opened it to admit Petty Officer Williams, a stocky man in his early 30s with alert eyes that immediately focused on Sarah. Petty Officer Williams, Anderson said, this is Lieutenant Martinez. I want you to look carefully at her and tell us if this is the person you saw at the base exchange 2 days ago. Williams studied Sarah's face intently for several long moments. Sarah remained perfectly still, allowing him to make his examination. Finally, he shook his head slightly. The height and general build are right, and the hair color is close. But something's not quite the same. The person I saw had a different way of carrying herself. Maybe? And the face is similar but not identical. Commander Blackwood leaned forward. Similar but not identical? Can you be more specific? Williams thought carefully. The bone structure is very close, but the person I saw had different eyes, maybe a slightly different nose shape, and she moved differently, more aggressive if that makes sense. Sarah felt a surge of vindication, but Rodriguez wasn't convinced. Petty Officer Williams, you were certain of your identification when you first reported the incident. Now you're saying there are differences. Master Chief, I was certain about what I saw. Someone wearing SEAL insignia who shouldn't have been. I reported it because it was clearly wrong. But now that I'm looking more carefully, I can see differences between this officer and the person I observed. Anderson pulled out a folder. Let's move on to the tattoo identification. Lieutenant Martinez, please show Petty Officer Williams your forearm tattoo. Sarah rolled up her sleeve again, revealing the complex memorial tattoo she had shown the day before. Williams examined it closely, his expression changing from concentration to confusion. Sir, this isn't what I saw at all. The person at the base exchange had what looked like a SEAL trident tattoo on her forearm. Very clear and obvious. This tattoo is completely different. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Williams had provided definitive proof that whoever he had seen was not Sarah Martinez. But Commander Blackwood wasn't ready to close the case. This confirms that Lieutenant Martinez was not the person observed at the base exchange, Blackwood acknowledged. But it doesn't explain the security clearance irregularities or the other reported incidents. We still have evidence suggesting someone is using her identity for illegal activities. Rodriguez crossed his arms. Commander, if someone is impersonating Lieutenant Martinez, they've done their homework. They know enough about her appearance to fool casual observers, and they have access to her personal information. Which raises the question, Peterson added, of who would have that level of access and what their motivation would be. Sarah had been thinking about this question since learning about the security clearance issues. Commander, I'd like to request access to the security logs showing when and where these unauthorized accesses occurred. If someone is using my credentials, there should be electronic fingerprints that can help identify them. Blackwood considered this. That's classified information, Lieutenant. But given the circumstances, I can share some general details. The unauthorized accesses occurred from terminals at 3 different locations: the Naval Intelligence Center, the base library, and an off-base location we're still trying to identify. The Naval Intelligence Center? Sarah felt her stomach drop. Commander, I work at the Naval Intelligence Center. My key card and biometric data are in the system for legitimate access. Someone would need physical access to my credentials or biometric information to impersonate me there. Exactly, Blackwood replied grimly, which suggests the perpetrator has insider knowledge and possibly inside help. The investigation was becoming more complex by the minute. Sarah realized she wasn't just fighting to clear her name. She was caught in the middle of what appeared to be a sophisticated intelligence operation using her identity as cover. Commander, Sarah said carefully, I think we need to consider the possibility that I'm being targeted specifically. My deployment assignment next month involves sensitive intelligence work with allied forces. If someone wanted to compromise that mission, discrediting me would be an effective way to do it. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. That would explain the timing. All of these incidents started shortly after your assignment was announced. Commander Blackwood made notes in her file. Lieutenant Martinez, I want you to provide us with a list of everyone who knew about your upcoming deployment assignment. Also, anyone who has had access to your personal information, key card, or biometric data over the past 2 months. As Sarah mentally compiled the list, she realized how many people had legitimate access to her information. Her commanding officer, the deployment coordination team, IT personnel, security staff, and numerous others in the intelligence community. The pool of potential suspects was uncomfortably large. There's something else we need to consider, Peterson said. If someone is going to these lengths to frame Lieutenant Martinez, they might not stop with what we've discovered so far. They could escalate their activities. The thought sent a chill through Sarah. She had been focused on clearing her name, but she hadn't fully considered that she might be in actual danger from whoever was orchestrating this campaign against her. Williams raised his hand slightly. Excuse me, sirs, but there's something else about the person I saw that might be helpful. She had a small scar on her left hand, near the thumb. Very distinctive. And she was wearing a ring that looked like a Naval Academy class ring, but from a different year than what I'd expect for someone Lieutenant Martinez's age. Sarah looked at her own hands. No scar, and her Naval Academy ring was from the correct graduation year. Petty Officer Williams, can you describe the ring in more detail? It looked like maybe a 2015 or 2016 class ring, ma'am. Definitely older than what you'd have. Commander Blackwood leaned forward with interest. That's very specific information, Petty Officer Williams. A 2015 Naval Academy class ring would belong to someone who graduated 3 years before Lieutenant Martinez. Sarah's mind began working through the possibilities. Someone from a Naval Academy class of 2015 would have had time to establish a military career, gain security clearance, and potentially have access to the kind of information needed to impersonate her effectively. Commander, I think we need to cross-reference Naval Academy graduates from 2014 to 2016 who currently have positions that would give them access to naval intelligence systems and my personal information. Already ahead of you, Blackwood replied. We'll also be checking for anyone matching your general physical description who might have had contact with your deployment assignment paperwork. As the meeting concluded, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The evidence was clearly pointing away from her as the perpetrator and toward her as the victim. But knowing that someone with military training and security access was actively working to destroy her career was almost more frightening than the original accusations. Walking back to her quarters, Sarah reflected on how quickly her life had changed. 3 days ago, she had been a respected intelligence officer preparing for an important deployment. Now she was the target of what appeared to be a sophisticated conspiracy involving identity theft, stolen valor accusations, and potential espionage. But she had one advantage her unknown enemy might not have anticipated. She came from a family of fighters. Her father hadn't earned his place in SEAL Team 6 by backing down from difficult situations, and Sarah hadn't gotten through the Naval Academy by giving up when things got tough. Someone had made the mistake of targeting the wrong person. Sarah Martinez was going to find out who was behind this campaign against her, and she was going to make sure they faced the consequences of their actions. The investigation was just beginning, and she intended to see it through to the end, no matter where it led. As she entered her quarters, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. Her personal laptop, which she was certain she had left closed, was now slightly open. Someone had been in her room. Sarah stared at her laptop for several long seconds, her military training warring with her instinct to immediately check what had been accessed. She forced herself to back away from the computer and call base security before touching anything. If someone had been in her quarters, there might be evidence that could help identify them. 20 minutes later, her small room was filled with investigators. Commander Blackwood had arrived within minutes of Sarah's call, bringing with her a team of NCIS forensic specialists. Chief Anderson was documenting everything while Rodriguez interviewed Sarah about her normal laptop habits. Lieutenant Martinez, Commander Blackwood said, pulling on latex gloves, I want you to walk me through exactly how you left your quarters this morning. Every detail you can remember. Sarah closed her eyes, visualizing her morning routine. I woke up at 0630, showered, got dressed in my service uniform. I checked my email on the laptop, then closed it completely. I always do that for security reasons. I made sure it was flush against the desk before I left at 0745. And when you returned just now, the laptop was open about 2 inches. Not much, but definitely open. I never leave it that way. Specialist Torres, the forensics technician, was dusting Sarah's desk for fingerprints. Commander, I'm finding prints that appear to be different from the baseline set we took from Lieutenant Martinez. Someone else has definitely been here. Sarah felt vindicated, but also violated. Her personal space had been invaded, and whoever was targeting her was escalating their campaign. Commander, what do you think they were looking for? Information, Rodriguez answered grimly. If someone is impersonating you, they need details about your life, your habits, your work assignments. Your personal computer would be a gold mine of intelligence. Commander Blackwood was examining the laptop carefully. Lieutenant, I need to ask you to step outside while we process this properly. If there's digital evidence, we can't risk contaminating it. Sarah reluctantly left her own quarters and waited in the hallway. Through the open door, she could hear the investigators discussing what they were finding. The conversation was technical and muffled, but she caught references to network intrusion and data extraction devices. After an hour, Commander Blackwood emerged with a grim expression. Lieutenant Martinez, someone connected a sophisticated data extraction device to your laptop. They downloaded a significant amount of information, including your email archives, personal files, and stored passwords. The invasion of privacy was bad enough, but Sarah realized the implications went much deeper. Commander, my laptop contains information about my upcoming deployment assignment, including some operational details that aren't widely known. Exactly, Blackwood replied. Whoever did this now has access to classified information about your mission. That elevates this from identity theft to potential espionage. Rodriguez joined them in the hallway. There's more. Specialist Torres found evidence that someone installed monitoring software on your computer. They've potentially been watching your activities for weeks. Sarah felt sick. Every email she had written, every file she had accessed, every personal conversation she'd had through digital channels had potentially been monitored. How is this possible? Base security is supposed to prevent unauthorized access to quarters. Someone with authorized access, Anderson said, emerging from her room. No signs of forced entry. Either they had a key or they convinced someone to let them in. Commander Blackwood's phone rang, and she stepped away to take the call. When she returned, her expression was even more serious. That was my office. We've identified 3 more instances of unauthorized access to classified systems using your credentials, all within the past 24 hours. Someone is accelerating their activities. The timing was suspicious and frightening. Just as the investigation was beginning to clear Sarah's name, the perpetrator was becoming more bold and reckless. Commander, it's almost like whoever is doing this wants to be caught. Or they're running out of time for whatever operation they're conducting, Rodriguez suggested. If your deployment is next month, they might have a deadline for accomplishing their real objective. Sarah's mind began working through the implications. What if the stolen valor accusations were never the real goal? What if they were just a distraction to keep me occupied while someone accessed classified information using my identity? Commander Blackwood nodded thoughtfully. That would explain the sophistication of the operation. Identity theft for personal gain is one thing, but this level of planning suggests state-sponsored or organized criminal activity. The investigation had evolved far beyond what anyone had initially imagined. Sarah realized she wasn't just fighting to clear her name. She had become an unwitting participant in what might be a major intelligence breach affecting national security. "Commander," Sarah said, "I want to help catch whoever is doing this. What if we set a trap? What do you have in mind?" Sarah had been thinking about this possibility since discovering her laptop had been compromised. If they're monitoring my digital activities, we could feed them false information and see how they respond. Maybe arrange for me to access fake classified materials and see if they take the bait. Rodriguez looked intrigued. That's not a bad idea, but it would be dangerous. If these people realize you're actively working against them, they might escalate to physical violence. The thought was sobering, but Sarah had made her decision. "Master Chief, my career is already destroyed if we don't catch whoever is doing this. And if they're accessing classified information about military operations, they're potentially endangering the lives of service members. I can't stand by and do nothing." Commander Blackwood considered the proposal. "It's risky, but it might be our best chance of identifying the perpetrator quickly. However, any operation like that would need to be carefully planned and executed with proper security measures." As they discussed the possibilities, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but something about it seemed familiar. She answered cautiously. "Lieutenant Martinez? This is Ensign Patricia Collins from the Naval Intelligence Center. I need to speak with you urgently about a security matter." Sarah looked at Commander Blackwood, who nodded for her to continue the conversation. "What kind of security matter?" "Ensign Collins. Ma'am, I've been reviewing access logs as part of a routine security audit, and I've discovered some irregularities associated with your user account. Someone has been accessing classified systems using your credentials at times when you were documented as being elsewhere." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "Ensign Collins, can you meet with me and some investigators from NCIS? This ties into an ongoing investigation." "Actually, ma'am, that's why I'm calling. I try to report this through normal channels, but my supervisor told me to ignore the discrepancies. He said it was probably just a logging error and not to pursue it further." Commander Blackwood gestured for Sarah to put the call on speaker. "Ensign Collins, this is Commander Blackwood from NCIS. Can you tell me who your supervisor is?" "Ma'am, it's Lieutenant Commander David Morrison. He's been acting strangely about this whole situation. He seemed almost angry when I brought the irregularities to his attention." Sarah and Commander Blackwood exchanged significant glances. Lieutenant Commander Morrison had access to all the systems that had been compromised, and he would have had knowledge of Sarah's deployment assignment from the beginning. "Ensign Collins," Commander Blackwood said, "I want you to stop what you're doing and meet us at the base security office immediately. Don't discuss this conversation with anyone, especially Lieutenant Commander Morrison." After ending the call, the investigators huddled to discuss this new development. Rodriguez was the first to voice what they were all thinking. If Morrison is involved, he would have had access to everything: Sarah's personal information, her security credentials, her deployment details. And as her supervisor's colleague, he would have known her schedule well enough to commit the impersonation incidents when she had solid alibis, Anderson added. Commander Blackwood was already making calls to coordinate Morrison's surveillance and eventual interrogation. But Sarah realized there was still one crucial piece of the puzzle missing. "Commander, we still don't know about the physical impersonation. Morrison doesn't match Petty Officer Williams' description of the person at the base exchange. If he's involved, he's not working alone." "You're right," Blackwood replied. "We're probably looking at a conspiracy involving at least two people, Morrison handling the electronic side, and someone else doing the physical impersonation. As they walked toward the security office to meet Ensign Collins, Sarah reflected on how quickly the investigation had progressed. What had started as humiliating accusations about stolen valor had revealed a sophisticated intelligence operation that threatened national security. But they were finally getting close to answers. The afternoon sun was beginning to set as they entered the security building. Sarah knew that within the next few hours, they would either identify the conspirators or face an escalation that could put multiple people in danger. Either way, the truth was finally within reach. Commander Blackwood paused before opening the door to the conference room. "Lieutenant Martinez, I want you to know that regardless of how this turns out, your cooperation and professionalism during this investigation have been exemplary. You've conducted yourself with honor throughout this ordeal." Sarah felt a wave of emotion, but kept her voice steady. "Thank you, ma'am. I just want to make sure whoever did this faces justice and that no other service member has to go through this experience." As they entered the room to meet with Ensign Collins, Sarah caught sight of her reflection in the window. She looked tired and stressed, but there was something else in her expression: determination. She had inherited more than just her father's memorial tattoo. She had inherited his refusal to quit when the mission wasn't complete. The mission to clear her name and protect national security was almost finished. But Sarah knew the most dangerous part was yet to come. The interrogation room fell silent as Lieutenant Commander Morrison was led in by two NCIS agents. Sarah watched through the one-way glass as Commander Blackwood prepared to confront the man who had been systematically destroying her career and potentially compromising national security. Beside her stood a figure she hadn't expected to see: Rear Admiral James Harrison, the base commander who had arrived an hour earlier demanding a full briefing on the investigation. Morrison appeared calm and confident as he sat down across from Blackwood, showing no signs of the guilt Sarah had expected to see. His crisp uniform and professional demeanor suggested a man completely in control of the situation. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison," Blackwood began, "we're investigating irregularities in classified system access logs that appear to be connected to your department. Can you explain why Lieutenant Martinez's credentials were used to access sensitive materials when she was documented as being elsewhere?" Morrison barely hesitated. "Commander, system access logs aren't always accurate. We've had issues with the timestamp synchronization between different networks. It's entirely possible that the logs are showing incorrect access times." Sarah felt her stomach clench. Morrison was smoothly deflecting the accusations with technical explanations that would be difficult to disprove without extensive digital forensics. "What about the unauthorized access to Lieutenant Martinez's personal quarters?" Blackwood pressed. "We have physical evidence that someone broke into her room and compromised her personal computer." "That's concerning," Morrison replied, "but I fail to see how it relates to me. Base security issues are unfortunately common. It could have been a random incident or someone looking for valuable personal property." Admiral Harrison leaned forward to speak into the intercom. "Commander Blackwood, may I join you in the interview?" Moments later, Admiral Harrison entered the interrogation room, and Morrison's composure shifted slightly. Sarah could see a flicker of concern cross his face as he realized the level of attention this investigation was now receiving. "Admiral Harrison," Morrison said, standing to attention. "Sir, I'm not sure why I'm being questioned about Lieutenant Martinez's security issues. I've had minimal interaction with her, and I certainly haven't had any involvement in whatever incidents have occurred." Admiral Harrison remained standing, his presence filling the room with authority accumulated over 30 years of naval service. "Lieutenant Commander, I've been briefed on this investigation, and I have some specific questions for you. Are you familiar with Lieutenant Martinez's upcoming deployment assignment?" "Only in general terms, sir. I know she's been selected for a joint task force, but I haven't been briefed on the operational details." "Interesting," Admiral Harrison replied, "because according to our records, you requested access to those operational details 3 weeks ago, claiming you needed them for personnel coordination. Sarah saw Morrison's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Sir, I may have requested general personnel information to ensure proper coverage during her deployment. That's standard procedure for department coordination. Admiral Harrison pulled out a tablet and scrolled through some documents. Lieutenant Commander, I'm looking at your access logs right now. You reviewed Lieutenant Martinez's complete deployment files, including classified operational parameters, tactical assignments, and intelligence briefings. Can you explain why a department coordinator would need access to that level of detail? The room's atmosphere grew tense as Morrison realized his lies were being systematically dismantled. Admiral, I may have accessed more information than strictly necessary. Sometimes you need complete context to understand personnel requirements. Or, Admiral Harrison said coldly, you were gathering intelligence for someone else. Through the glass, Sarah watched as Morrison's careful composure finally began to crack. Sweat beads appeared on his forehead, and his hands clasped and unclasped nervously. Commander Blackwood seized the opening. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, we have evidence of a sophisticated operation to impersonate Lieutenant Martinez and access classified information. We know you had the technical access necessary to compromise her credentials. What we want to know is who you're working with. I don't know what you're talking about, Morrison replied, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Admiral Harrison moved around the table to stand directly behind Morrison's chair. Lieutenant Commander, I've served in the Navy for over 3 decades. I've seen traitors, and I've seen cowards. Right now, you have the opportunity to act with honor by telling us the truth. But if you continue to lie, I promise you that the full weight of military justice will come down on you. Sarah found herself holding her breath as the confrontation reached its climax. Everything depended on whether Morrison would break under pressure or continue to maintain his denials. Suddenly, Morrison's phone buzzed with a text message. Commander Blackwood reached for it before Morrison could react. Who's sending you messages during a security interview, Lieutenant Commander? Morrison lunged for the phone, but Admiral Harrison's hand clamped down on his shoulder, holding him in his chair. Blackwood read the message, her expression growing grim. The message says abort everything. They know. It's from a number registered to someone named Catherine Rodriguez. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, who is Catherine Rodriguez? Morrison's remaining composure crumbled completely. She's my wife. But, Admiral, I can explain everything. This isn't what it looks like. Admiral Harrison's voice cut through the room like a blade. Your wife? Catherine Rodriguez, let me guess, Naval Academy class of 2015. Yes, sir, but the same Catherine Rodriguez who was discharged from the Navy 2 years ago for security violations? Admiral Harrison's voice was rising with controlled fury. The same Catherine Rodriguez who bears a strong physical resemblance to Lieutenant Martinez and who would have intimate knowledge of naval procedures. Sarah felt pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Morrison's wife had been the physical impersonator while Morrison handled the electronic aspects of the operation. They had been working together to destroy her career and steal classified information. Commander Blackwood was already coordinating with her team to locate Catherine Rodriguez. Through her earpiece, Sarah could hear reports that patrol units were en route to the Morrison residence and other locations where she might be found. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, Admiral Harrison continued, you and your wife have committed treason against the United States. You've compromised classified operations that could cost American lives. You've attempted to destroy the career of an honorable officer. You have betrayed every oath you've ever taken as a naval officer. Morrison seemed to collapse in on himself. Admiral, my wife, she was approached by foreign intelligence operatives. They threatened our family. We didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, Admiral Harrison replied. The choice to report the contact to security authorities. The choice to protect your country instead of betraying it. The choice to act with honor instead of cowardice. Sarah watched as Morrison broke down completely, confessing to months of espionage activities coordinated by his wife and her foreign handlers. The stolen valor accusations had indeed been a distraction, designed to keep Sarah occupied while they used her identity to access and steal classified information about upcoming military operations. An hour later, the interrogation was complete, and Catherine Rodriguez had been arrested at the airport while attempting to board a flight to Mexico. The conspiracy had been fully exposed, and Sarah's name had been completely cleared. Admiral Harrison found Sarah in the observation room, where she had been watching the final stages of Morrison's confession. "Lieutenant Martinez, I owe you an apology on behalf of the entire command. You've been subjected to a sophisticated intelligence operation that would have fooled most people." "Thank you, Admiral, but I'm just glad we caught them before they could do more damage." Admiral Harrison studied Sarah carefully, his experienced eyes taking in details that others had missed. "Lieutenant, I understand you've been reluctant to discuss your family's military background during this investigation, but I want you to know that your father's service didn't go unnoticed by the naval leadership." Sarah felt her breath catch. "Sir, Master Chief Roberto Martinez was one of the finest SEALs I ever had the privilege to serve with. His loss in Afghanistan was felt throughout the special operations community." Admiral Harrison paused, his voice softening slightly. "I was the officer who recommended him for the Navy Cross he earned posthumously." Sarah felt tears threatening, but maintained her military bearing. "Sir, I didn't know you had served with my father." Admiral Harrison rolled up his left sleeve, revealing a tattoo remarkably similar to Sarah's own. "Your father and I served together in Iraq before his assignment to SEAL Team 6. When I saw your tattoo during the investigation briefing, I recognized those symbols immediately. They're from operations that have never been publicly acknowledged." The room fell silent as the significance of this revelation sank in. Admiral Harrison continued, "Lieutenant Martinez, that tattoo tells me several things. It tells me your father trusted you with information about classified operations. It tells me he believed you understood the weight of military service and sacrifice. And it tells me that you come from a family that has given everything in service to this country." Sarah found her voice. "Admiral, my father always taught me that honor isn't just about following orders. It's about doing what's right even when it's difficult." "He taught you well," Admiral Harrison replied. "Your conduct during this investigation has exemplified everything the Navy stands for. You didn't just defend your own honor. You helped protect national security and preserve the integrity of military service." As they walked out of the security building together, Admiral Harrison made one final observation. "Lieutenant Martinez, your deployment assignment to the Joint Task Force stands. In fact, based on your performance during this crisis, I'm recommending you for early promotion to Lieutenant Commander. The Navy needs officers who can maintain their integrity under pressure and think strategically under fire." Sarah stopped walking, overwhelmed by the turn of events. In less than a week, she had gone from facing potential court-martial to being recommended for promotion. "Sir, I don't know what to say. Say you'll continue to serve with the same honor your father did. Say you'll remember that the uniform you wear represents something larger than yourself. Say you'll never forget that sometimes the most important battles are fought not on foreign shores, but in defense of the principles that make military service meaningful." As the sun set over Naval Air Station Pensacola, Sarah Martinez walked back to her quarters with her head held high. The tattoo on her forearm, which had been instrumental in proving her innocence, felt heavier than usual, weighted with the knowledge that it represented not just her father's sacrifice, but her own commitment to upholding the values he had died defending. The ordeal that had threatened to destroy her career had instead revealed the strength of her character and the depth of her integrity. She had faced false accusations with dignity, conspiracy with courage, and betrayal with determination to seek justice. Her father had always told her that a true warrior's strength wasn't measured by the battles they won, but by how they conducted themselves when everything seemed lost. Sarah Martinez had passed that test with honors that no academy could teach and no promotion could bestow. The future stretched ahead, filled with new challenges and opportunities to serve. But whatever came next, Sarah knew she would face it with the confidence that comes from understanding who you are and what you stand for. She was the daughter of Master Chief Roberto Martinez, an officer of the United States Navy and a warrior in her own right. That was a legacy worth fighting for, and a truth that no conspiracy could ever steal.